Join the coven. This is a warning. Do not ignore. A story written by Advanced Tangelo. A link to the original Reddit post will be available in the description down below. My first mistake was believing what the modern media would have us believe. Things on television happened in the West, in the States, and the United Kingdom, and sometimes in the sweeping forests of Germany. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that India, Hindustan, was the birthplace of myths and stories and legends, but also of nightmares and horrors and things that went a lot worse than bump at night. Legend says that the king of demons once conquered all of creation, heaven, hell, and earth itself. And so he began a reign of terror, inflicting his cruelty on gods and humans alike, until the creator Vishnu came to save us. Vishnu descended to earth in the guise of a beggar and begged the demon king for a boon, a gift of land, but only as much land as he could cover in 3 steps. The demon king was perceptive, and he was keenly aware of who the beggar was, but he had grown proud of his strength and confident in his might, so he agreed nonetheless. And so Vishnu planted 1 foot on all of heaven and another on all of earth, for he was magnificent, and his powers beyond comprehension. And then a 3rd sprouted from his chest and landed on hell. And so it was that the gods regained control of the universe. The demon king was broken, but Vishnu was a kind lord. He remembered the generosity of his enemy, and so granted him the domain of hell, and to reward the virtue found in an unlikely source, he decreed that the demon lord would be worshipped 1 night of the year until the end of time, and allowed to return to earth with this horde of demons, ghosts, and spirits, and the world went on. But the demon king waited, smarting at having been tricked so. Every year he ascended, his army at the ready, his weapons rusty and dripping, but Vishnu had tempered his own kindness in turn. He had taught humanity to protect themselves by lighting up the world on this, the evilest of nights, on the 14th night of the lunar cycle. 14 candles to be placed around the house to prevent the ghosts from entering. 14 leaves to be eaten to gain the blessings of all their ancestors and to protect them from possession. And to worship the goddess Kali, who descended to earth every year in the form of the fierce Chamunda, and protected all of humanity with 14 loyal ghosts, spirits who still remembered who they once were. And so it went for thousands of years until warnings passed into myth, passed into memory. The land changed, the people changed, and the times changed most of all. Industry became the new god of the country, the internet her divine child, and so we forgot. My second mistake was, like many others, foregoing the 1,000-year rituals. I lit a single candle after my mother called and nagged, forwent the 14 leafy greens entirely, and did not spare a single prayer for Kali. But my 3rd mistake was deliberate, and worst of them all. Diwali, for the generation above me, meant lights, crackers, and the warmth of family. For us, it was a festival of lights, crackers, and a legitimate excuse to party the night away. I don't remember much of the night before the events of the 14th night, but I remember landing up at my friend's party. I remember the first shot vividly, and the second, and the third, and the fourth. And then it began to get blurry. I remember music deep and echoing and throbbing through my bones, shuddering my bones with every beat. I remember the starburst of crackers all around me, punctuated by the sound of cherry bombs. I remember a girl with skin as dark as Kali herself, and darker hair that went down to her waist. I should have stayed with her. I stumbled out past 12 at night, mumbling my excuses and turning onto the pavement. The world swam unfairly before me, intent on making me reel my way through it, ignoring the shouts of the concerned or the annoyed who crossed my path. I don't know how I ended up there. I don't know where it was, even. But one moment I was staggering my way through lit-up streets, and the next, I was standing in a pitch-dark alley, staring into the crack that lay at my feet. And it was quiet, quiet like a forest when the forest hunts, like the wind before the eagle swoops. The crack was shaped like an angry scar on the road, the sort that a knife would leave on an unsuspecting cheek. All around me was darkness, except for the orange glow that seemed to shine out from underneath it. In that moment, it was just me and the neon glow of the abrasion on the Earth's surface. My buzz vanished. Perhaps it was some ancient caveman part of my brain screaming at me to return to my senses and run. But I was hypnotized, enchanted by the ruby glow. I fell to my knees, hunching over it. Time seemed to have ceased, and space halted. And the only thing I could see was the red glow, and it was growing and growing until I saw, etched into the sides of the crack, a word. It was written in letters both like and unlike anything I'd ever seen, resembling my native tongue, but with characters I'd never seen. They stood dark and solid on the red glow, as if they had been sketched into the pitch with bloody nails. I had never seen anything like it before, but my tongue was moving of its own accord. It rolled and curved around that word, forming a sound that was like a dying man's last rattle, a last groaning heave of breath. What it was, I cannot say again, or maybe I will not again. And then the red was glowing, spreading, moving, blinding me until it turned painful, and then white, and then it turned dark, and I knew nothing more. I awoke to the sound of crying. For a second, the world was a blur, and the next, it slid into sharp focus as I jerked upright in bed. I was in my room, and there was a baby on the floor? It all came rushing back, the party, the alley, the crack on the ground. Something was very, very wrong. The baby lay on the floor, pink and squalling, looking for all the world like it had just entered the world. I watched it for long moments, the sound of its cry the only thing I could hear for miles. After a few seconds that seemed like lifetimes, I leaned forward. It kicked its arms and legs, as if sensing the intrusion on its personal space. And then it began to grow. before my eyes. It stretched and reshaped itself into a toddler, and then a child who stopped crying but still jerked about. And then it was a teen, and then a full-grown adult. The man on my floor stood up and brushed himself off, the darkness winding around him like loving fingers to morph into clothes. I opened my mouth to scream, but the air seemed to have frozen in my lungs. Have you ever had goosebumps? I hadn't. Until then, not really. The way I had had them then, every hair on every inch of my body was standing up in sudden alert. Every inch of me screaming silently in horror at the sight of the man who looked exactly like me. It was like an artist had taken a picture of my face and then erased it and redrawn it a few times, and curves. The curl to his mouth was crueler than mine had ever been, the shape of his body leaner and harsher. He spoke my name, and it was the sound of snakes slithering over a corpse's skin, and then I finally screamed, and screamed, and screamed until I was bent over from the force of it. Are you quite done? I shot back to the wall, away from the thing that was now sitting on the edge of my bed. I'd prefer it if you wouldn't scream again. The words that said it were guttural, crude, and obscene, but made perfect sense as they entered my ears. Who are you? I stuttered, trying slowly to reach for the phone in my pocket. He held the device up in his hand. It's pointless. You're already dead. What? He sighed, his lip curling up into an amused grin. You were dead the instant you gazed into the abyss, child. Your mind just doesn't know it yet. I gazed outside my window at the darkness outside, at the light that came from nowhere to illuminate my room, and something cold and solid slid into place in my mind. I looked at my hands, paler than they had ever been, and felt the smooth, tight skin around my face. And in death, I found a courage that I hadn't in life, for I asked, "Then why are you here?" To reward you, of course. Fool you might have been to call my name, but it is a great gift you have given me. My first question flashed through my mind again, and he seemed to be able to read either my face or my brain itself, for he smiled. For a split second the edges of him blurred, and suddenly I was looking at a horror beyond comprehension, a thing with mouths where they couldn't possibly be, with far too many teeth and curved nails that curved in on themselves to pierce blood-red skin, with eyes that blinked out of every surface, and the shadows receded to leave my doppelganger sitting before me, and I released a breath like I had been punched in the gut, for I had seen the darkness anoint his brow, sit atop his forehead like jagged stakes driven into a soft head. And it was the Demon King who was sitting on my bed. "What do you want of me?" "What do you want of me, my lord?" he corrected gently. "You are my subject now, and I would have you treat me as such. But I shall excuse such insolence tonight, for you have sprung my trap and opened the way to my reascension." "Reascension?" "A retaking, if you will," he explained, "the spoils of a war that I had won long ago and had been cheated out of. And then I shall rule over all creation." His mouth split along the corners to open in a smile that showed far too many rows of razor-sharp teeth. And then gods and humans alike will know the true force of my anger. But the 14th night is over, I protested, grasping on to the last straw like a drowning man. You cannot ascend on any other night. But the doorway is open now. On the night of the dead and the evil, I will rise once more, be it in a week or a month or a year. My dead heart raced as I took in the implications, as I imagined what it would mean for the world, for everybody I'd left behind. I had a nephew, a boy of just 5. Mercy, my lord, I asked. I beg for mercy as a boon. Spare us all from your wrath, and rule over hell as you have always done, and so too will humanity worship you forever. He tilted his head to the side, and perhaps it was my imagination, but his eyes glowed golden briefly, and then he said, "No," and my heart sank. I've been punished for my naivete before. Ask what you want, child, but ask not things I can give. Life, then? I asked. Could you bring me back to life? He smiled, that terrible smile again, and I felt ugly things crawl under my skin, straining to break out. I could send you back, of course, now more than ever, but life is not my domain, no. But that does not mean you could not return to your world. But send you back, I could. Something in the way he said it made me sit back with a heavy heart, swallowing the bitter truth that I was irrevocably, irretrievably dead. I felt the world blur again through tears, not alcohol this time, and the cold trickle of salt water down my cheek. Come now, he said. It won't be so bad. In a year, you won't remember who you were. Given time, you could rise in my ranks and be by my side as I retake what is rightfully mine. I imagined myself riding alongside him, driving my sword through my sister and my nephew and my mother. I felt sick. There had to be something I could do. But my lord, I begged, the world is much changed since you last rose. There are new kingdoms, richer kingdoms for you to conquer, with wealth double of ours, and with religions that are split in the face of your divine power. I had his interest, I could tell. The people have changed, my lord. No longer are they as simple and ascetic as they once were, especially not in the kingdoms I speak of. Here, you would find resistance at every door, candles on every window, and ancestors guarding every home. But there, they have embraced hell much more than they have heaven, teetering on the edge of a great descent themselves. You are telling the truth, he said, surprised. I will hear more of this. And so, I told him of a place where people lived, not in peace and goodness, but in war and gluttony, and lust and avarice, where family was dead and ancestors meant little, where excess and greed had taken the place of the frugal and moral. I told him of shining screens that were new gods and old gods that were slowly fading. My first mistake of buying into the stories of the West became my greatest strength. I thought of my sister, who had been deported back just as she had been about to birth my nephew, and so I spun him a golden vision, and he took my bait. He promised my people immunity, granting mercy to those who still lit candles in their homes and remembered their ancestors well. But your boon, he asked, when I was done and kneeling before him, shaking from the horror I had just wrought. It is a great service you have done for me, and I would see you rightfully gifted. A place by my side, of course, but more, anything you ask? My lord, I said, daring not to meet his eyes. I would give them a chance if I could. The United States of America was born less than 3 centuries ago. The story of its rise is the story of the modern world, of the successes and the victories and decadence of humanity. It is the epicenter of the modern world, of the 21st century as we know it. I beg of you to listen, not just for those in the country, but all in the West, for he is a demon. He is only as good as his promise to save only those who take measures. He is strongest on the night of spirits, on the night of ancestors and the dead and the evil. On this day he shall rise again, and he shall be terrible and fierce, and he shall unleash horrors like you have never seen before. Remember this. Next Halloween, carve your pumpkins, but also light 14 candles all around your house. Keep your children in, and remember the 14 leaves and herbs and vegetables you must eat. Spinach, amaranth, water spinach, mustard, radish, basilica, fenugreek, young jute, turnips, chickpea, asafoetida, bottle gourd, pumpkin, and centella. Offer them to your young, to your old, and to your dead who have long left you. Pray, and when he comes, kneel.